I use the term filmmaker on myself because it's good for marketing, but it's good to get clients. But really and truly, I guess technically I'm a filmmaker, but sometimes I think about this. I've never actually made a narrative film. So can one call themselves a filmmaker? I have made documentaries. Are they mainstream if they're on, faith-based quote unquote channels? There's a lot of kind of, what does mainstream even mean anyway? I had a really good conversation with Azhar Osman, really great guy, comedian and actor, on our podcast 76 Boulevard, and we asked him the same question about what's the difference between mainstream and faith-based media, and he's like, what does mainstream even mean? If you're doing what you love and creating content that's good enough, what does it matter who's watching it? There's 1 billion Muslims that they're not mainstream. So there's that conversation as well to have separately. So based on that kind of context, I appreciate your kind words. I grew up watching film. I always say film is my second religion after Islam. It raised me just as much as Islam did, and the seerah of the Prophet did. I grew up on Spielberg, and I grew up on all these great filmmakers, and I love film and TV, and it's a big, huge part of my life. And I take a lot of my spirituality from the experiences that I kind of gained from watching film, to be honest with you. So it's a huge part of my life, and I guess kind of what's happened, I never kind of planned it. I always wanted to be a narrative filmmaker. I still want to be a narrative filmmaker. Whether I get there or not is up to God and my own kind of unresolved insecurities resolving themselves. But I think that where I've kind of been led is I have this great love of my faith, of Shia Islam, of the Ahlul-Bayt, as you can see in the poetry and stuff like that. And I have this great love of film too, and they've kind of merged together in what has now become me doing client work and also documentaries as well, and just telling stories that I feel like are really interesting. And right now, alhamdulillah, I'm at a stage in my life where, because I'm freelancing, I can kind of just like almost do what I love more than kind of like work for someone. I've got another project coming up which I done myself, not getting paid to do it by anyone. It's a short documentary about a Muslim Shia guy who works for NASA. He works on the Mars rover program. It's like a 3-minute short piece that I filmed when I was in California, inshallah. And I've got a lot of ideas for what I want to do as well. So it's just kind of, it's been a really enjoyable journey. I think people, when they see, like yourself, for example, when you see the series and you talk about, for example, glass ceiling, that's not what's being experienced on my side at all. And I think that's very interesting, that kind of like separation between what you see on screen and what you perceive a filmmaker to be, and what that filmmaker is going through. There's always a bit of a separation there, and I think that's very interesting. But I would just say that in this day and age where cameras are accessible to all of us, anyone can pick up a camera and shoot. Anyone can buy a MacBook and start editing. It's not difficult. You can even shoot a movie on your iPhone, which has been done already. And I think that there is no end to what any of us can do. All we can do is just express our creativity in the best way possible, and in a way that we enjoy. And I think that when you tell your truth through documentary or through narrative filmmaking, it will resonate with others. And I think that one piece of advice I would give is try not to look too much toward what others are doing, try to emulate them. I think emulate art, that's good. Look at your favorite movies and documentaries and try to emulate them to an extent. That's good, but emulating people is a dead end zone. I've had people in the past that came to me when it comes to poetry and say, I want to become like you when it comes to poetry. It's like, well, we don't share the same life, so you can't follow that same journey. You have to take your own journey and see where that kind of takes you. And I think it's the same thing with filmmaking and making documentaries. You can you really need to follow your own path and see where Allah takes you, and just embrace what makes you you. I think that's what's really important. No idea, honestly. I just putting it together, I thought people might like it, enjoy it, and say, oh, this is nice, and that's kind of like it. I was a bit worried about some of the nuance, because I feel like, unfortunately, for whatever reason, our community doesn't like nuance. They don't like to hear things that they're kind of aren't pleasing to the ear, especially with the episode of the Islamic Revolution, for example. Even though it was largely, it wasn't about the revolution itself, it was about how the revolution impacted America. And even though it was very positive, there was that kind of a segment where Haji Najah was like, look, it had a bad effect, or at least the effect that it had on our community becoming more conservative had a negative effect on many people. I thought that would get a bit of backlash. Sheikh Hashim at one point spoke about the kind of the difference between how Ali Shari actually caused a divide in thinking between West Coast Shias and East Coast Shias, and that the West Coast were more like, hey, we don't need an alim. We like the alim, we don't need the alim here. We can run our own streets, while the East Coast were more like, the alim is the authority. Even though it was very historical and very kind of like, objective, I feel like for whatever reason, people in our community don't like nuance. They don't like to hear things that are objective. And I feel like sometimes that kind of not scares me, but like I always expect there to be a bit of backlash to that. Maybe there still will be when the views get more. I don't know. But I was very surprised with how many people enjoyed it, how many people are watching it and talking about it. I was very surprised, honestly, on Twitter when Sana shared it and when Mehdi Hassan shared it, and it made me realize again that you can't hide from your truth. You can't. If you want to succeed in this world, generally, you got to embrace your truth as much as possible. And even me, when it comes to my poetry, my Shia-ness the past few years, is that the way I've kind of like spoken about Shiism and the Ahlul-Bayt, I haven't like ignored it, but I haven't been as overt as I used to be when it comes to Shia, just because I feel like people want to hear about what how they can connect with you rather than how they can disengage with you. And unfortunately, sometimes when you set up so many boundaries, I am Shia, Pakistani, this, you can kind of set a bit of a separation between you and the other. At least that's one perspective. But one thing I've realized is that the more you embrace your truth, the more you embrace who you are and your story, the more people will kind of resonate with it. This for me was a dream project, and that's definitely been communicated, I think, through the series. And I think why a lot of people resonated with it, because I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, even though the budget was low. It wasn't what it should have been. I spent way too much time on it. I told you that the editing experience was very difficult, but I still put a lot of time and effort into it. And I think because of that, people resonated with it, because that people liked it. I'm fascinated with about the idea of Shiism. Fascinates me. The idea of America fascinates me. The idea of the West and the frontier, and this peak of Western quote unquote civilization. So the two are just my favorite things, really, just kind of cobbled together. And because of that, I think a lot of people, because of that, it was a massive part of my truth. And I think because of that reason, people resonated with it. So I'm very surprised that people, alhamdulillah, are enjoying it. I'm surprised people haven't caught on that the last two episodes aren't that well edited. But so I'm glad that people are enjoying it anyway. And alhamdulillah, again, retrospectively, a lot of things I wish I could have done. But very, very pleased with the feedback. Very, very pleased with the actual series, alhamdulillah. And I hope that it inspires people for years and even decades to come. And that's the beautiful thing about something like this, a 10-part series, that it remains, inshallah, forever, and people can always come back to it and watch it and discover that story. And that story will really live on, which I think is the best, most comforting thing about it. I remember when I released the trailer, I got a 2-minute voice note from Haji Najah Bezi, and I was really scared because I saw, I was like, she's gonna attack me for 2 minutes. But she was crying for 2 minutes. She was crying. She was like, "Thank you for telling our story. This is this story. We're just so happy that you've told this story." And I realized that this story is one that hasn't really been told. And while it did kind of exist in some form in the book, everyone wants to see. When something's portrayed visually, I feel like it lives on, further. And I'm really happy, alhamdulillah, that it has that series remains, and inshallah, hopefully, it will continue to live on and tell that story to generations to come, inshallah. In terms of advice for people, again, I think I'll just kind of reiterate. There's this thing that Martin Scorsese, I believe, he says this. He says, in this day and age, any of us can pick up a camera and start filming. It's not difficult. And you can even pick up your phone, like I said, and start filming. So really and truly, if you want to make a film, if I want to make a film, I tell myself, I have the tools to do it. If you want to make a documentary, you have the tools to do it. It's not difficult. And even though objectively speaking, I keep saying that the budget for the series was low and I didn't have enough money to spend on equipment. But in regards to the actual kind of professional grade equipment that people use on on like high budget documentaries, it was really abysmal. So there's no limit to what you can spend, and you can also really just pick up your phone and start filming at the same time. I think it's really less about not having the tools available to you, and more about you telling an engaging story. I'm not going to claim to be able to tell an engaging story or be a master at it, but like I told you, you know, I live on film, and I can always differentiate between a good film and a bad film, and I'm sure many people can. So it's really just about picking up how to tell a good story, be it in documentaries or be it in narrative. What kind of stories do you want to tell? What's interesting to you? What are the niches that you haven't really heard spoken about, which you feel like you can kind of unearth? That's what all good documentaries are, right? They're just kind of like either they're hidden history stories like the Shia of America series, or for example, they're just, you know, interesting spins on stories we already know. For example, there was a documentary I saw on Netflix the other day about one of the folks who fell from the tower on 9/11. That's an interesting spin on a story we already know, like a bit of a magnifying glass into it. And you can really make a documentary about anything. I know the other day, me and my friends were sitting down, and we were having a conversation about Kentucky Fried Chicken, and just how, you know, we were all talking about how, yeah, I remember in 2010, you know, when these shops first started, we started eating out, and then we went into a conversation about growing up poor, and because we were poor, we couldn't go to like high-end restaurants, and we ended up going to like fried chicken shops instead. And then suddenly we're like, we can make a whole documentary about this, just about, you know, fried chicken and London culture and poverty, and we still kind of do want to make a documentary out of it, and immigration. But my point is you can make a story out of anything. You can make a story out of anything. You just got to kind of like find that and kind of, you know, and do that. And I think two pieces of advice I'd give. One is emulation is a filmmaker's best kept secret. There's a lot of elements of this series which I picked up from a show I love on HBO called The Pacific, for example. It's the intro idea from that. If you watch Ava DuVernay's 13th, that documentary we've all seen, I framed the interviews the same way that she framed it. So a lot of it was emulation. Emulation is a filmmaker's best kept secret. Always try to emulate what you love, but understand why you're using, you know, these kind of techniques and what you're using them for. And second thing is YouTube is your best friend. You know, if you want to figure out how to shoot something, how to light something, what mics you should use, what camera you should use, everything's on YouTube, and you know, that's your masterclass for everything you need to kind of tell a good story from like a technical perspective. In terms of myself and lessons I've learned along the way, again, this is a journey that I feel like I've been working in media for 10 years, but for me, I feel like I'm just starting with this series, because I feel like it's the first project I've made. And again, it might just be from my technical eye, but it's the first project I've made, which I'm like, you know, this is actually a bit professional, quote unquote, mainstream kind of grade, based on the way it's shot and edited and told. So I feel like the journey for me is just starting from here. You know, there's a long way I want to go. But my biggest lesson has just been to kind of like let go and just kind of like let the river take me wherever Allah wants to take me. And I think that's another, you know, piece of advice I can give to everyone, inshallah, who wants to jump in this industry, inshallah.